Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In this lecture, we will provide a summary of the paper Islam's Gift, an Economy of Spiritual Development. We start by explaining how social science is actually based on European experience, is not universal. It's obvious that social science is a study of human societies, and therefore Western social science is based on study of European societies. Now the question is, why does social science claim to be universally applicable to all societies, not just European societies? And the second mystery is, why do Muslim economists accept this claim and use Eurocentric social sciences to discuss Islamic economics? Since social science itself claims to be universal, objective, and valid for all societies, it's necessary to establish that it is not, and that it is in fact applicable only to European societies. This is done in two papers in detail, which are discussed here, and so we won't spend more time on this. There's no harm in studying European societies, but the harm comes from the concealment of this idea and the assertion that what applies to European societies is universal and applies to all societies. How this came to pass is a study in intellectual history, how the stream of ideas shaped European social science. Some of the details are provided in this article on Method or Madness, which explains how the methodology of an objective and physical science were applied to the study of human societies. This was aided by the philosophy of logical positivism, which said that all valid knowledge is a production of science, and Max Weber, who argued that social science should be objective and factual and not normative. As a result, 20th century social sciences attempted to remove all values in order to make social science scientific. But this is an impossible task. To study human society, we must invoke values, and so what happened as a result was that values were concealed within an apparently objective-looking framework. Any study of human societies must take a three-dimensional approach. Human behavior has some ideals, normative, and then there is an actual behavior which will be different from the ideal. And then there is the question of how to transform actual behavior towards the ideal. This is unlike physical sciences, where there are no two ways for a particle to behave, and how it behaves is how it behaves. There is no ideal form and no way of changing the behavior. So obviously the methods of physical sciences are not applicable to the human sciences. Many normative elements are concealed in economics. In particular, it's assumed that everybody is rational, whereas rational is a normative statement. And rationality is a particular nationality, which means rejection of the unseen, no afterlife, heaven and hell, which means that the only possible goal is to maximize pleasure in this present life. And furthermore, since there is no judgment, there are no ethics, no basis for morality. All is fair in pursuit of love and war. This leads to individualism, everyone caring only for themselves, hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure, greed, competition, survival of the fittest as the law of the jungle operates for the society. Amartya Sen has remarked that anybody who behaves in the rational way that economists say is rational would actually be a fool. There are many reasons why one should not be maximizing pleasure from consumption. One of them is discovered by Richard Easterlin in his Money Buys Happiness paper. In his study of happiness, he found that massive increase in consumption of goods over time, 100-fold exceed, did not bring increase in happiness. And similarly, in cross-section studies, it's not true that the countries which are richest are the happiest. It's obvious on reflection that pursuit of wealth brings only short-run happiness. In the long run, the factors which determine happiness have nothing to do with wealth or consumption. So people who have studied the real sources of happiness have found that character, which is involved in ability to endure difficulties with patience and with a smile, and social connections, loving others and being loved by others, and gratitude, contentment with what you have, and reflection, which is on our own identity, on our history in a positive way, this is what leads to happiness. Given that any social science must be built on normative foundations, and that Western social science is based on Eurocentric foundations which have toxic social norms, it's necessary to construct an alternative which has explicit normative foundations based on Islam. So the central point at which you start is to note that the human being has the capacity to rise higher than the angels, and also the capacity to fall lower than the beasts. And so the goal of life is to realize the hidden potential with which we are born. As a society, the social goal is to enable every human being to realize this potential. So how do we realize this potential for excellence within us? For this purpose, there is the message of the Quran and the messenger who showed how to act upon this message. And the Quran states that he is the most excellent pattern of conduct for us, and that excellence in conduct and character is superior to worship. And so basically the goal is to mold our character in the pattern shown by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was sent as a mercy to all of mankind. So the central elements of the message is that we are all brothers and sisters, sons and daughters of Adam and Hawa alayhi salam, and that we should behave well towards each other, that we should like and prefer for our brothers and sisters what we want for ourselves. And so pro-social behavior, welfare of society should be put above our own personal behavior. Also, we need to have tolerance. This is dictated by Deen, that if different people have different goals and different ideas, this is no cause for us to hate them. In fact, we should treat them as our brothers and sisters and allow for this diversity. So how does this apply to economics? The crucial difference between Islamic economics and capitalist economics is that Islam strongly differentiates between needs and wants. Islam encourages the fulfillment of needs and comforts, but prohibits the excessive and wasteful consumption, which are known as israf and tabzir. So in this one ayah, it says that you can wear beautiful clothes, eat and drink, but do not waste and do not do excessive consumption. So many people ask, what's the difference? And so basically needs are satiable, and once you fulfill them, they disappear. But wants are insatiable and multiply upon being fulfilled. As the hadith says, that if you give man a valley of gold, he will want another one, and nothing will fill the belly of man except the dust of the grave. This is talking about the insatiability of wants. At the heart of a capitalist economy is massive surplus production, and in order to allow for surplus production, we need to have surplus consumption, which means that the desires and wants must be fanned and flamed in order to create the desire to do massive overconsumption. Economists are defined to be those who seek to fulfill all desires without questioning their origin, but this is not permissible for a Muslim, because fulfillment of idle desires is prohibited in Islam. So Islam requires us to differentiate between needs and wants. We attempt to satisfy the needs of the population, but to prevent and prohibit satisfaction of idle desires. So Islam and economics differ on their conception of human welfare, whereas economists say that the goal of life is to maximize pleasure from consumption. Islam ridicules those who have taken their desires for God, because it says that they have been blinded to their own true welfare. And those who prefer the life of this world will not succeed, neither in this world nor in the next. So the goal of life, according to Islamic ideals, is to achieve spiritual progresses. The Quran mentions 3 stages, although the Sufiya have mentioned many other more detailed sub-stages. So the first one is Nafs-e-Lawwama, or the commanding soul, in which the man obeys the desires of his nafs. And this is very closely related to Homo economicus. The second stage is a man with a conscious conscience who sometimes does good and sometimes does bad and blames himself for doing bad. And the final stage is the Nafs-e-Mutmainnah, which finds contentment when in being aligned with the desires of Allah Ta'ala, with the orders of Allah. So how do we make spiritual progress? We do so by restraining our desires. So the Quran says that you will not achieve to goodness until you spend of that which you love the most. So if we love things and we spend them for the sake of Allah, then we elevate the love of Allah above the love of material things. And we must strive for excellence in conduct. And among the best of deeds is service to the creation of God for the sake of the love of God. And all of the creation is the family of God, so Allah Ta'ala loves best those who are kindest to His family. So these are some of the rules that we must follow in order to achieve spiritual progress. According to economic theory, the goal of life is to maximize the satisfaction of desires, but Islam prohibits us from doing this. And it says that the path to spiritual progress lies in restraining our desires. So, for example, when we fast, we do not eat or drink according to our desire, and this is going to develop within us God consciousness or taqwa. By restraining ourselves from desires, we progress to the stage of Nafs-e-Lawwama. Our desires often lead us in the wrong direction, and restraining them leads to a situation where we sometimes are successful and sometimes we fail. And when we realize that the life of this world is play and illusion, and these are not the things which matter in the long run, then even though when we follow our desires, we realize that this is not good for us, this is not good for society, and we feel that we have done something wrong, and this feeling eventually prevents us from doing wrong until we achieve the third stage. At the third stage, the Nafs-e-Mutmainnah becomes contented with following the orders of the law and finds pleasure in doing good, and it sees the ugliness of bad deeds and automatically and naturally avoids them. So one of the key consequences of spiritual progress is that we will adopt simple lifestyles. We will not look for luxury and increasing standards of living, no conspicuous consumption, no buying things for the sake of showing off, nor are we impressed by the luxury of others, and we feel social responsibility. How can I eat something luxurious if my brothers are hungry? And so when we start taking social responsibility, the market mechanism, buying or selling, become less important because the needs of everyone are cared for by the mechanisms created by social responsibility. One of the central drivers of this behavior is generosity, which is a very strong teaching of Islam and is mentioned many times in the Quran. There are many ahadith and many Quranic verses which teach us to be generous, to be kind to others, to be compassionate, and to give to others, even though we are ourselves in need. In this context, there is a dramatic contrast between capitalism and Islamic economics. Whereas the spirit of capitalism is the pursuit of wealth for its own sake, the Quran prohibits the pursuit of wealth for its own sake. We can acquire wealth, but only for carrying out some permissible purpose. Well, how can we achieve these high ideals? When a society has collective goals, these do not get translated into practice until there is an institution which enables the realization of the collective realization of these goals. So institutions are very important to achieving collective goals. The institutions of an Islamic society are radically different from those of capitalism. Banks are capitalistic institutions which are designed to encourage the accumulation and hoarding of wealth, whereas the waqf in an Islamic society encourages people to use their excess wealth to spend on the needs of others. Similarly, takaful is based on the cooperative spirit of helping each other, whereas insurance is based on taking advantage of the needs of the poor. the function in finance of qarz hasana is that if people are needy, you should give them money on a social basis, not charge any interest, and make it easy and flexible for them to pay back. If we use an Islamic economy, then the production will emphasize the needs and will not gear towards luxuries. Whereas in a capitalist economy, it's the money vote which determines consumption. So if there are millions of hungry children and they have no money, food will not be produced for them. But if there's a billionaire who wants to achieve space flight, then rocket ships will be provided for him to take a trip to the moon. One of the key differences between Islamic and capitalist society is the firms. In Islamic society, the business is service oriented, whereas in capitalism, it's profit oriented. This makes a huge difference in many different ways, which has been discussed in other articles of mine. Finally, the labor market is created when man is considered as an object for sale and purchase. When we think of human beings as infinitely valuable, then we cannot purchase their time, and the whole labor market has to be reconceptualized. All people participate in the act of production as a service to society, and therefore their labor is meaningful. The money they receive is not interpreted as a sale of the life or a sale of hours of time in return for money. Rather, the money is given in order to enable the act of production in comfort and ease for all producers. So we conclude with a few remarks. For the teachings of Islam launched a revolution in world history, and for 1,000 years the Islamic civilization was a shining light for the entire globe. For complex reasons, this civilization declined, and at the same time, there was the rise of the West, which undertook global conquest and colonization of minds, which removed the essence of Islamic ideals from Muslims all over the planet, which is why Islam has become a stranger to Muslims. Today, the Western educational system all over the world continues this colonization of minds, and so the revolutionary teachings of Islam are unfamiliar to Muslims, and they still have the same revolutionary potential today that they did 14 centuries ago.